the longer a woman has been without a relationship. There is something hauntingly beautiful about a woman who has stood alone for a long time. She is not empty, she is overflowing with all the things she's learned to give herself when no one else showed up to offer them. Time carved her out like rivers carve canyons, and if you think she's weaker because she hasn't had a partner in a while, you don't understand power yet. She's tasted the quiet, she's sat through the awkward dinners, the holidays where everyone asks, "So, still single?" She's walked into rooms alone and left them untouched. She's seen the pity, felt the assumptions, and chosen her own damn path anyway. And over time, she's built a kingdom out of solitude. She doesn't jump when her phone pings. She doesn't beg for attention. She's learned to trust the rhythm of her own heart. She's gotten comfortable with being misunderstood. And that's the first sign of a woman who's truly free. She doesn't love easily anymore, not because she's cold, but because she's careful. Not because she's hard, but because she's healed. She knows now love isn't a lifeboat, it's a mirror. And if it doesn't reflect her strength, her softness, her soul, she's not stepping in. A woman who's been single a long time doesn't need you. She chooses you, or she doesn't. And that's terrifying for anyone used to control, because you can't break her. You can't scare her with silence or games. She's done time in the trenches of loneliness and came out the other side alive, whole, and radiant. All right, let's take that first truth and breathe life into it. Let it stretch its legs. Let it pour like poetry, like truth that's been waiting to be spoken out loud. A woman who's gone long without a relationship learns to feed her own soul. That's not just some cliche floating around on Instagram captions. It's survival turned into sacred ritual. It's waking up on cold mornings with no arms to pull her close and still finding warmth in the quiet. It's learning how to make a cup of tea feel like a ceremony, how to make a solo dinner feel like a feast, how to fill the silence with music that echoes her heartbeat instead of someone else's footsteps. She learns to recognize the hunger in herself, not just the kind for food or touch, but the kind for meaning, for connection that doesn't drain, for companionship that doesn't demand a smaller version of her. And since there's no one to give it to her, she becomes her own source, her own muse, her own lover in the emotional sense. She starts chasing sunsets like they're answers. She writes, or paints, or walks for miles, and in those moments, she isn't lonely. She's becoming. She starts holding her own hand through the storm, whispering to herself, "We've got this." And when she cries, because of course she does, she doesn't wipe the tears away quickly to prove she's strong. No, she lets them fall. She honors them. Because strength isn't the absence of ache. It's learning how to stay tender through it. She finds beauty in her rituals, her rhythm, in not having to explain her moods to anyone, in being able to laugh loudly in bed at 2 a.m. with a book and a glass of wine, or sing her favorite heartbreak song with no one telling her to quiet down. She stops reaching for a hand to hold and starts reaching inward. And that right there is where the shift begins, when she realizes she can be full without being filled by another person. It's not that she stops wanting love, it's just that she no longer fears the void. She's faced the silence, and instead of it echoing with shame, it started singing with freedom. The longer she goes without someone else to pour into, the more she starts pouring into herself. And over time, that cup that once felt cracked and leaking, it overflows. And you know what's wild? People start to notice. They can feel it. Not the loneliness they expect, but the self-contained fire. The kind of energy that says, "I've danced through darkness and taught myself to glow." She walks into rooms, not needing validation, not waiting for anyone's gaze. And that unbothered energy, that's magnetic because it's rare, because it's earned, because it's real. She becomes emotionally sovereign. That's not just a fancy phrase, it's a revolution in her spirit. A reclaiming of every piece of herself she once scattered at the feet of people who didn't know how to hold her. Emotional sovereignty means her peace is no longer up for negotiation. It means the mood of the day is no longer dictated by someone else's inconsistency. their hot and cold attention, their inability to show up. She doesn't ride the emotional roller coasters of temporary lovers anymore. She stands still while the world spins, rooted, unshakable. She begins to understand the weight of her own energy, how sacred it is, how easily it can be drained by people who haven't done the work to carry their own. And so she stops giving parts of herself to anyone who hasn't earned it through consistency, clarity, and kindness. She no longer chases closure, she no longer explains her worth, and she definitely doesn't audition for a place in anyone's life. The approval she used to beg for, she gives it to herself now. Fully, freely, fiercely. This emotional sovereignty doesn't mean she's closed off. It means she's intentional. It means her heart is no longer tossed around like a paper boat in someone else's storm. It's anchored, not to another person, but to a deeper knowing within herself. She can feel the pull of old patterns, of people who smell like past wounds dressed in new clothes. But now she pauses, she breathes, she chooses, and that choice, it's power, it's liberation. And with time, she starts to see the red flags before they even finish waving. She sees manipulation behind the sweet talk. She recognizes avoidance disguised as independence. She spots emotional immaturity trying to pass as charm. And rather than stepping in to fix, to heal, to prove, she steps away. Not because she's bitter, but because she's finally free. Because her peace costs too much now. Because she knows the price of letting chaos in, and she's done paying for other people's damage with pieces of her spirit. She doesn't get pulled into drama anymore. She doesn't lose sleep over what someone might have meant by a half-hearted text, or why someone ghosted after things seemed so good. That confusion, that spiral, that was the old version of her. The woman she is now doesn't beg for clarity, she becomes it. Her boundaries are clear, her self-respect louder than her loneliness. She's no longer scared of walking away, she's scared of betraying herself. This emotional independence is earned. It's built from long nights spent rebuilding, from heartbreak, from journaling until the pages bled truth, from therapy sessions where she had to face her own patterns, not just blame someone else's. It's the reward of choosing herself again and again, even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt, the longer she is alone, the clearer she hears her intuition. And that's no small thing. That's the kind of inner magic most people spend lifetimes trying to tap into but never do. Because the noise around them never stops and neither do they. But when a woman walks solo for a while, when she starts to sit in the stillness rather than run from it, something changes. The volume of the outside world drops, and the whispers from within start getting louder, sharper, truer. At first it's subtle, just a gut feeling she can't explain, a pull in her chest that tells her to walk away from someone who checks all the boxes but feels just a little off. It's an unease when she's around someone who smiles with their mouth but not their eyes. A sudden need to leave a room, end a conversation, switch direction. Not because of fear, but because something deeper inside her says, this isn't it. And instead of doubting that voice like she used to, instead of overthinking and overriding it for the sake of not seeming too sensitive or too much, she listens. She honors it. Time alone sharpens her instincts like a blade. She starts seeing the unspoken in people's behavior. The way they show up late without apology, the little digs they hide as jokes, the emotional bait they throw to get a reaction. And while others might brush it off, she can feel the misalignment. Her body reacts before her brain even has time to catch up. That's not just intuition, it's wisdom. It's the body remembering what her heart once ignored. And with that clarity comes courage. She no longer needs a reason that makes sense to anyone else. She doesn't wait for someone to prove they are untrustworthy with facts and receipts. If her spirit says leave, she leaves. If her gut says wait, she waits. And when her whole being lights up in the presence of someone or something that feels right, she moves toward it without apology. That internal compass becomes her guide. Not validation, not approval, not fear of missing out. The beauty of this trust in intuition is that it spills into everything. It's not just about relationships. It shows up in how she chooses her friendships, her work, her projects, her home, her rhythms. She stops following trends or doing what's expected. She doesn't force herself to be social just because it's a Friday night. She doesn't say yes to things that drain her just to avoid guilt. She learns that saying no to what isn't meant for her is the same as saying yes to her truth. So intuition becomes sacred. It becomes her best friend, her protector, her guide. And where she used to second guess herself, now she stands firm. She knows that voice has never lied. It only ever got drowned out by noise, by people who confused her, by a world that taught her to distrust her own senses. But no more. Now she moves through life like a woman who knows. And that kind of knowing, that's a force nothing can shake. Her standards rise not out of arrogance but out of experience. And that shift is quiet, powerful, almost invisible to those who haven't lived it. It's not about becoming hard or impossible to please. It's about becoming deeply, unshakably aware of what her soul can no longer settle for. She's been through enough now. She's tasted what it's like to love someone who didn't know how to hold her heart with care. She is given second chances to people who use them as open doors to do the same damage twice. She's compromised, made herself smaller, tried to be more palatable just to keep peace. And now she knows better. The woman she is today doesn't get impressed by shallow charm or pretty words. A nice smile and a smooth voice might once distracted her, but now she sees past it. Now she watches actions, not promises. She watches how someone treats the waitress, how they speak about their ex, how they respond to the word no. She listens not just to what they say, but what they avoid saying. She notices when someone flakes on small things because she knows that's how people eventually flake on big things too. She's not looking for perfection, but she's done tolerating patterns that feel familiar in all the wrong ways. Her standards rise because she's finally met herself, and in that meeting, she found someone worth protecting, someone worth showing up for. And if someone else can't bring the same level of effort, presence, and emotional maturity, she'd rather walk alone than keep dragging dead weight beside her. She's not bitter, she's just selective now. And that selection comes from self-respect, not fear. It's wild too because people will start calling her intimidating. They'll say she's too picky, too hard to please, too high maintenance. But really what they mean is she won't settle for crumbs anymore. She won't accept love that's built on conditions, ego, or convenience. She's no longer willing to explain her worth to people who should have seen it from the start, and that scares people who are used to being able to get away with offering the bare minimum. Raising her standards doesn't mean she's closed off. It means she's deeply open, but only to what's real, only to what nourishes, only to what meets her on the same frequency. She's no longer impressed by someone who's busy all the time but can't make space for her. She's not drawn to the thrill of emotional unavailability like she used to be. She doesn't mistake unpredictability for passion. She doesn't call toxicity chemistry. She knows now. True love is steady, it's kind, it's clear, and it's earned. And so she builds a new filter, not a wall but a fine sieve that only lets in what aligns. And if that means she waits longer, so be it. If that means she walks away from people who seem good on paper but feel wrong in her spirit, she doesn't flinch because she finally understands that being alone with high standards is far less lonely than being with someone who makes her feel unseen while lying next to her. She starts to value depth over presence. And that's a profound shift, one most people don't even recognize until they've been through the silence, the loneliness, the empty noise of surface level connections that left them feeling more alone than solitude ever did. She's been through that. She sat across from people who were physically close but emotionally galaxies away. She's had conversations that went on for hours but said nothing real. She's been held in arms that never really saw her, and so the older version of her clung to presence just to have someone there, anyone there, but not anymore. Now she knows the difference between company and connection, between noise and nourishment, between someone who wants access to her and someone who wants to understand her. She stops being impressed by proximity. Someone texting good morning every day without ever asking how her soul is doing doesn't move her anymore. Someone who's always around but never actually sees her inner world doesn't get to stay in it, because now her time is sacred, her energy is sacred, her space is sacred, and she's not giving it to people who only want to skim the surface. Depth for her isn't just about intense talks and poetic language. It's about realness, consistency, the ability to be present without pretense. She craves people who ask questions, that dig beneath the day-to-day, who aren't afraid of the messy, honest, complex truths that live inside her. She wants the kind of love that looks her in the eyes when things get hard and says, "I'm not going anywhere," not because it's convenient, but because it's rooted. And so the people she surrounds herself with begin to change. The ones who only knew how to give half effort start falling away, not because she pushes them out, but because they just don't fit anymore. Shallow connections can't breathe in the air she lives in now. She's done filling silences just to avoid discomfort. She's done laughing at things that don't really make her smile. She's done bending just to make other people feel more comfortable. If the vibe isn't deep, aligned, and real, she'll pass. This shift also shows up in how she spends her time. She's no longer chasing social highs or forcing herself to be around people just to prove she's not alone. She could be at a crowded party and still feel disconnected. Or she could be home reading a book, writing in her journal, or walking under the stars and feel more full than ever. Because depth isn't always found in others. It's something she's cultivated within herself. She knows now just because someone is present doesn't mean they're meant for her. Presence without purpose is noise. Closeness without connection is a slow starvation. She's not hungry like she used to be. She's fed herself truth for long enough to recognize when something's lacking, even if it looks perfect from the outside. And she refuses to starve ever again. Love becomes sacred, not casual, not careless, not some filler to pass the time or a distraction from boredom. When a woman's been without a relationship for a long time, when she's sat with her own silence, faced her own fears, and tended to her own heart, love starts to take on an entirely different shape. It's no longer about finding someone just to say she's not alone. It's no longer about ticking boxes or posting pictures to prove she's desirable. Love becomes a temple, a prayer, a choice so intentional it feels holy. She doesn't give her heart out like free samples anymore. She doesn't romanticize potential, doesn't try to water dead things hoping they'll bloom again. She's learned through her time in solitude that love is not something to rush or perform. It's something to grow, to nurture, to build. And she's not trying to build it on shaky foundations anymore. If the bricks of honesty, respect, emotional safety, and spiritual alignment aren't there, she's not even laying the first stone. Because she's had time now. Time to observe, time to heal, time to unlearn all the ways the world told her she had to contort herself just to be worthy of love. She's peeled back the layers of herself that once clung to anyone who gave her a little bit of attention. She's done looking for love in the eyes of people who don't even see themselves clearly. Now she looks at love the same way she looks at the sky, vast, wild, infinite. She knows what it can be, she knows what it should be, and she refuses to settle for anything less than divine alignment. That sacred view of love means she is no longer desperate for it. She honors it too much to beg for it. She doesn't want love that plays games or tests her patience just to see if she'll chase. She wants love that stands tall, that holds space, that brings peace. Love that feels like home, not a storm she has to survive. Love that isn't afraid of her depth, her ambition, her sensitivity. Love that doesn't try to mute her but harmonizes with her melody. She becomes more protective of her heart, not because it's broken, but because it's whole now. She knows what it took to get here. Every scar, every tear, every lonely night. She survived without anyone holding her but herself. And so if she's going to let someone in now, it's got to mean something. It's got to match the energy she brings. It's got to be worthy of the sacred thing she's offering. And she's not in a rush either. she's learned patience. She knows that sacred love isn't always fast or loud. It's often slow and quiet, growing beneath the surface before it ever blossoms. She's okay with waiting. She'd rather grow something real than grasp at something fleeting. Because love to her isn't a performance, it's a promise, a sanctuary, a return. She becomes her own muse, not in the romanticized, picture perfect way you see on social media, but in the real, raw, everyday sense. In the way she wakes up and chooses to pour into herself even when no one's watching. In the way she starts to dress for her own damn reflection, not for compliments. In the way she starts talking to herself with the kind of tenderness she used to reserve only for lovers. There's a shift in the way she carries herself, not because someone is validating her worth, but because she's finally doing that work from the inside out. She starts seeing beauty in her quirks, in the imperfections she used to hide, that freckle on her cheek, the way she laughs too loud, the passion that spills over when she talks about things that matter to her. These become her favorite parts. Where she once sought external affirmation to feel worthy, now she looks in the mirror and says, I like her. I really do. And it's not ego, it's self-recognition. It's falling in love with the soul behind the eyes, with the fire that didn't burn out, even after all the heartbreak and empty nights. She starts creating for herself again. Maybe she writes poetry that no one else reads, or she dances in the kitchen at midnight just because it makes her feel alive. Maybe she picks up a paintbrush, a journal, a camera, or a guitar, not to impress anyone, but because expression feels like freedom. She remembers the girl she was before the world told her to be smaller, quieter, easier to love. And now, she honors that girl, she feeds her, she becomes her again, but wiser, stronger, more grounded. When she's her own muse, everything she does is with intention. The way she styles her hair, the way she walks into her room, the way she chooses her words, it all becomes an extension of her self-respect. She doesn't need the world to tell her she is valuable. She already knows. And because of that, the energy around her shifts. People can feel it, the quiet confidence, the calm self-assurance. She doesn't seek attention, but she draws it, not because she's trying, but because she's glowing from within. Being her own muse also means she stops comparing herself to others. That game, that trap, it loses all power. She doesn't care who's more popular, more partnered, more praised. She's not racing anyone. She's not measuring her life in milestones that were never hers to begin with. She's walking her own path, blooming in her own time, becoming in her own rhythm. And every time she chooses herself, every time she chooses peace over performance, solitude over shallow connection, depth over drama, she builds more of that unshakable foundation, that soul-deep love that says, I am enough, even when no one says it. Especially then, she becomes the one she writes about, the one she dreams of, the one she's been waiting for. She stops looking for someone else to come along and make life beautiful because she's already doing that on her own, with every step, every breath, every small act of defiance that says, I matter, even when I stand alone. Peace becomes her new definition of love. Not passion that burns so fast it leaves ashes behind. Not chaos disguised as chemistry. Not the thrill of uncertainty where she's always wondering if she's too much or not enough. No, after being alone for a while, really alone, she starts to crave something different, something quieter, softer, stronger. She begins to understand that love isn't supposed to feel like walking on eggshells. It's supposed to feel like coming home. And peace, peace feels like that. She's lived through the turbulence of trying to make it work with people who only loved parts of her. She's tried to earn love by shrinking herself, by staying silent when her soul was screaming, by calling dysfunction compromise. But now she recognizes that peace isn't boring. It's rare, it's powerful, it's what her nervous system has been begging for all along. And once she gets a taste of it, true emotional safety, steady affection, calm conversations, she can't unlearn it. She can't pretend the noise ever felt good. Peace becomes her compass. She starts to pay attention to how her body reacts around people. Does she feel grounded or guarded? Does she feel safe to be soft, or does she armor up just to survive the moment? She stops being seduced by the highs that come with unpredictable love because she's learned that every high is followed by a crash. And she's tired of crashing. She's tired of rebuilding herself after giving her heart to people who didn't know how to hold it. So now she wants what's calm, what's clear, what's consistent. Love to her becomes less about fireworks and more about the warmth of someone who chooses her every day without making it a game. Someone who listens deeply, who shows up when they say they will, who doesn't disappear when things get hard. Someone who doesn't push her to be someone she's not, but celebrates who she already is. She's not chasing adrenaline anymore, she's chasing alignment. She's not looking for someone to complete her, she's looking for someone to meet her where she is at, as she is. This love rooted in peace doesn't mean it's without passion, but the passion is steady like a flame that never goes out. It doesn't burn her, it warms her. It gives without asking her to bleed for it. It's love that lets her rest, love that lets her breathe, love that holds space for her tears, her laughter, her questions, her quiet. Peace becomes the standard, the new baseline. And anything that disrupts that peace, no matter how shiny it looks on the outside, no matter how magnetic the pull, she walks away. Because she knows love should heal, not harm. It should steady, not shake. It should anchor, not unmoor. So now she waits. Not out of fear, not out of bitterness, but out of reverence for herself, for the journey, for the love she knows exists, the kind that doesn't rush in and out like a storm, but rises like the sun, steadily, faithfully, without asking her to dim her light. She's not lonely in the waiting. She is rooted, she is full, she's whole. Because she's come to understand that the love she's been searching for outside was always meant to be built within. And from that foundation, from that calm, from that sacred self-knowing, she will love again, but only when it feels like truth, like peace, like home. Until then, she walks alone, not empty but overflowing, not desperate but divine. And when love comes, if it comes, it will find her already complete, already radiant, already everything she was hoping to become.